Welcome to another episode of our conversations. The last time we had a conversation around marginal gains where I was talking about how you make incremental changes, but those incremental changes are compounding in nature in the sense that whatever you're doing today has a marginal gain on the next piece, and therefore you're able to and reap the rewards of whatever investment you're putting, whether it's in your professional life, in your financial investment, but also investment in your social life and your social relationship that you're working on. After that kind of period, I took a couple of weeks of off break where I was doing a lot of reflection, but also focusing my career and my academic journey and seeing what is next for me and how do I want to do it in a better way. And in the last weekend, from Friday, Saturday, Sunday, today, I've been in a weekend retreat, an immersive retreat around impact work and looking at social impact and system change in the different domains of work that we're involved in. This has been coordinated by the Skoll Center for Social Entrepreneurship, and in those conversations over the last 2 days, I feel I've been able to reflect more. I've been able to engage with people, but also have conversations that are stimulating and also challenging me to ask myself, why did I start doing the things that I'm doing? What impact can I make doing them? And what would the future look like in that kind of work that I am doing? And I think from that conversation, the greater extent of it is that we need to be grounded in whatever we are doing. And for me, this has been a grounding moment in the sense that reflecting on my journey, looking at social enterprises, doing community social work, but also my professional career and my personal life as a professional, as a human being, has been about making a difference linked to the past experiences, the context within which I'm working, and therefore the vantage point of being able to see a challenge and see a gap in the ecosystem and in the society where I'm operating in, and see that that particular challenge for whatever it is needs a solution. And the solution can only come when I decide to ideate around finding mechanisms of mobilizing resources, convening people, and being able to ground them and actually work towards delivering a particular product or service that bridges the gap from where we are at the moment to the envisioned ideal, which is the envisioned future for what we need to be. And that is a critical piece for me. And for me to be able to do that, there's need for grounding. And why do I look at it as a grounding moment for me in terms of my personal career, but also my professional life? I look at it as a grounding moment because we're in a dynamic world and we are exposed to lots of information, lots of perspectives, and also conflicting priorities in that journey. And in these conflicting priorities, at times we get swayed to the point where we are not so sure whether whatever it is that we are doing at the particular moment is what we need to focus on. And if so, then the question is, how do we balance the other competing priorities? It might be challenging, but it is worth making that conscious decision and saying, I will stay grounded. And where I'm not able to stay grounded, how am I going to ensure that whatever work, whatever intervention that I started working towards will be sustained to the next level? And that is a critical piece that we need to acknowledge and we need to ask ourselves, how are we working on it? And that is the essence of me having this conversation today. In my professional journey and in my work, I believe this is starting from 2010, where about when I was in high school, I had interest in businesses, finished my first business, starting in opening up a library and all that. And it has been a journey, and some of these I've written on my blog, thespark.co.ke. And when I've been doing all these work, one of the key things that keeps coming back is that there is something that I feel like needs to change. But I also acknowledge that as a human being, I have limitations. There's just so much that I can do. And these limitations are guided by either knowledge and my competencies. And therefore, that has been a key driver on asking myself, what competencies do I need to build on? What competencies can I outsource by getting people who are more competent and more qualified in those particular domains to be able to get into the fold and work with me to help me deliver on that mission? But on the other end, also acknowledging that I have a limited bandwidth and a limited finite time in time scope and horizon, and therefore some of these ideas might come from an understanding of the context within which I'm working, but I might not be the best person to work on them. And the only thing that would be within my purview to do is to outsource one of them to the next person. And if I'm not able to outsource it to the next person, it's about how can I design a solution that helps that person deliver it better. And probably at times it's about just brainstorming about it and keeping it in the archive, because in that archive as it is, maybe at one point it would be of value to me, or maybe it would inform my next action in developing an alternative solution or alternative product that would be of value in whatever scope that I am working on. So that is one of the key things that I need to have acknowledged over time. These ideas will come based on the context and the environment where we're working on. we need to acknowledge our limitations, and we need to be able to be clear that this is what I'm going to do, where am I going to do it, and how does that journey move forward to me. The other key piece around it is that acknowledging that at certain times we will be swayed away from whatever it is that we are working on, and it is understandable, it is permissible. But as we get swayed away, probably conflicting priorities, but also lack of clarity, but also at times it's about the self-doubt and not so sure about why you're doing what you're doing it. It's a moment that you need to take a pause, take a step back, and ask yourself why you started that journey, reflect upon it. And at times it's even about talking to people. And if you don't find the bandwidth to keep pushing at the same momentum, take time off, recover, regain, refresh yourself. It is important, and it's really healthy to be able to do that. And I believe the last 2 days have actually been one of those moments for me to just plug off, have a conversation with people, kind of reawaken that fire within me to make me believe that the impact work that I'm trying to make in the different spaces, whether it's in the corporate world, whether it's in the social enterprising world, but even in the professional networks and associations, and even at a personal life with my family, how am I making it count for me? That is a critical piece. So taking that time off to stay grounded, to stay focused, and to be able to be in tune with whatever it is that you are doing. And the other piece that I stay grounded on is the realization that when you start some particular project or whatever it is, and this is a link to another article that I wrote a while back in my website as well, blog. It was about implementing the pitch. And why do I talk about implementing the pitch? Some of the times we get ideas, we start brainstorming about it, we propose it somewhere, probably we initiate an idea or an initiative, but it never sees the light of day or never gets to gain traction. It's also important to implement the pitch. And when I talk about implementing the pitch, is that getting to execute it with all the challenges, with not lack of clarity, but doing something to get it moving to the next frontier. And as you're implementing it, putting in the structures that are necessary to ensure that whatever it is that you're implementing at a particular moment delivers value, sets the structures that even if you are not able to execute it to perfection, you've laid the groundwork and the foundational principles of what needs to be there for the next person to pitch in and actually help build it to the next level. This is a critical conversation, especially this part of it, in the sense that in the last couple of weeks, following the swearing in of the current president of the United States, conversations have been emerging, especially within the healthcare space, on the global south. And the focus has been around the suspension and the stopping of all aid funding to international organizations, especially WHO, and the stopping of operations by the USAID, which has been more focused on international development. It is a pain point, it is a pity that we are in this particular moment where we have to start having anxieties and confrontations around what the future of our health ecosystem and the future of social services and international development is going to look like following a decision of a particular state. But at the same time, we need to ask ourselves, how did we get to this particular moment that we are so reliant on a single entity and a single institution or a single country, such that failure to be for them to make a decision that will be favorable to our outcomes, we would be at a pity. We are at their mercy, and therefore it is a pain point for us. I think it's about implementing our solutions with the sustainability lens in them, but also with a systems thinking perspective where we know I have to put in the right policy ecosystem and policy structures to give it the latitude to grow organically and sustainably. But on the same note, being able to put up structures within the organizations and to invest locally, organically, with the people who are dependent on the ecosystem, so that we don't get to a situation where we always dependent on this particular kind of support that we are looking at. From a healthcare perspective, this has been a worry for me when I look at some of the declarations, the initiatives that have been founded within the African continent, and I'll be working on some paper trying to review some of these initiatives in the last couple of years. I remember the first kind of initiative that was established from some of my initial reviews was in 1991 when we had the Abuja Declaration. There was a Pan-African platform to work on research and development of HIV medications, TB, and malaria medicines. That was a clear dedication initiative. How far did that go? If I was to be honest, it never picked ground, and therefore the initiative died off and never saw the light of day. Moving forward, we've had so many series of interventions, declarations, agreements, policy positions, and all that. But how far are we going to go as a continent if our healthcare systems are not going to be as robust? And are we grounded on really following through on whatever initiative that we started off on? If we are not going to be able to do that, then the most likely is we will always be at the mercy of single entities, single states, but also not be able to have a resilient, self-sustaining ecosystem for our own people and for our own interventions that are addressing the social needs of the people that we care about. And the worrying piece where I put this to the aspect of being grounded is that when we come up with solutions, when we come up with interventions, it's guided by the fact that we acknowledge the context and the ecosystem within which we are operating. We see the problems, we envision solutions, and we understand the intervention that need to be between the aspirational future and from the underlying principle and the context of where we are. So bridging this gap is what needs to happen. And bridging that gap is through incremental intervention that we need to put into place. And unfortunately, to a greater extent, some of the work that we've been doing has not been delivering that, in the sense that we are doing it in segregated piecemeal interventions, which doesn't deliver on the results. So we need to have an aggregating anchor. Some of the work that we're doing with African Pharmaceutical Network is seeing how do we see that possibility? How do we establish the baseline framework where all the other players can plug into? Are we going to focus on research and development? Are we going to focus on pharmaceutical manufacturing? Are we going to ensure that we liberalize the business ecosystem so that we have an integrated marketplace that serves the people who need our services, who need solutions to deliver value in the ecosystem? Because when we do that, when we build the structures that are needed in a foundation or pillar that is actually anchoring the whole sector, we guarantee that our people, ourselves as patients, are able to get the things that we need. And therefore, that grounding is being able to go back on why we started, why we envision what we're doing. When we have the doubt, talking to people who can guide us and anchor us back into the conversations of what we're starting off with. And most importantly, taking time to pause, reflect. And the last piece, implementing the pitch, doing the very essential things that we need to do, but doing it with the institutional structures that are needed to ensure that that envisioned future becomes a possibility. That envisioned future becomes a reality and a realization of what we are capable of in terms of delivering interventions. And it's not going to be singular or linear in particular way, but it is an ecosystem approach where we need to ask ourselves, what are the different interfaces and levers of control that would be pulled into to help us deliver value that is sustainable, that is robust enough? That is what we need to be working towards. And you as a professional, you as an individual, when you're watching this, ask yourself from a perspective, what is it that you can do? Who can you convene? Who can you draw on? And when you have those anxieties, do you normally take a step back to reflect and see, what do we really need to do? And we understand the conflict priorities will come into place. When they do, try to manage them, but always stay grounded and say, whatever it is that I'm doing, I'm able to do it. When the ones that are beyond my scope, maybe I need to shoot them to other people to be able to work on. And if they are not able to work on them, probably they'll have it discussed with another person. And you will also keep discussing with other people. And that moves us closer to having a fair, just, and equitable society that is able to access the social services and social amenities that each of us need for a dignified human living. And that would be a successful world in my perspective. Thank you so much and have a good one.